Hey, it's David from Redneck Garage. Here in Nashville, it is cold this week. It's going to be highs in the real low 30s. So progress on working out in the driveway on the Jeep, as far as doing the body work, it's going to be a little bit limited. I thought I'd take just a few minutes and talk about tools and equipment. I probably started painting when I was 14, and that was the worst paint job you'd ever seen in the world. It looked like somebody shot sand through a spray gun. But it was my first paint job. By 1980, I had been painting for a little while, did motorcycles, and then did my first car and drove it to prom. So that was a pretty cool thing, and it actually turned out really nice. So I've got a few years of experience in doing paint and body work. Of course, not full-time. I'm not a body shop. I'm just a Redneck Garage. And thought I would give you some tips and pointers on tools that I found that were helpful, some that weren't helpful, some that are too expensive to buy, and some that you really can't do without. So with that, I'm going to talk a little bit about painting tools and the best thing to use for the garage mechanic. When you do any type of painting or body work, you're going to need an air compressor. And this is my air compressor. I've had the air compressor for probably about 5-6 years, and it's got a 30-gallon tank. It does an adequate job. It's actually a little small for if I was doing more work, I'd probably, or if I had to do it again, I probably would buy a little bit bigger one. This is a 110, and you can see it's a belt drive. You do not want to get one of the ones that's like oilless compressors. Number one, they don't have as high a CFM as a belt drive compressor, like a real piston type, and they're noisy. The buzz drives me insane after a while. Really, if I was going a deal, I would probably get a 60-gallon tank with a 220 outlet on the extension. There you run into having to run another outlet for it, but those actually have a higher CFM and they're a little bit bigger. So that would be more of the size I did. But this is adequate. So here's my thoughts on the compressors that you use for doing what we're doing in the garage. If you're wanting to do air tools like impact wrench, air ratchets, DA sanders, things like that, you have to have a higher enough CFM. If you're just going to spray paint, you need a much lower CFM. My first car that I painted, I used a little bitty Sears oilless compressor. No, it wasn't oilless. It had a piston in it, but it was one of the little bitty ones, and it had a very low CFM, but I was able to paint the car with very little problems on the compressor itself. But when you start wanting to use the DA, or you want to use something, when you get something like this, it's called a Mud Hog from Ingersoll Rand. My compressor is really not big enough to run this for a long length of time. I'm kind of disappointed in that, because this is a great tool. I can use it for a little bit, but it doesn't have the CFM to drive something this big. So mine is right on the margin of being able to do an impact wrench adequately for some of the really, really tight stuff. If I let it build up pressure all the way up to the maximum pressure, then yeah, usually the impact will work, but on a continuous basis. So that's what you run into with compressors. When you're trying to work on a budget, you know, if you're a high school kid or you're trying to find something that's in your budget, yeah, you can get a small one, but you're going to be doing a lot of hand sanding. And I'm not a big fan of that much work. It takes me forever to try to do stuff by hand like that, because I've used tools and I get lazy. The next tool I wanted to talk about is sanders. If you're going to be doing a lot of body work, then you're going to need some type of sander. Now, if you've got an adequate compressor, then you're in good shape to use some type of air sanders. Now, if you go to Home Depot or Lowe's, or you know, maybe Harbor Freight on some of them, they make this type of DA sander. It's called a knuckle buster. There's a weighted end on the bottom of it. It's very heavy. They're not super expensive, and if that's all you can afford, then this is better than hand sanding. I hate them. I think they suck. I would never buy another one after I used it. They take a lot of air. They're very, very air consuming for your compressor. So what I found with these is that I would use them for about 15 minutes and then I'd have to wait for my compressor to build up. They're just not very, very comfortable. So the next one that I tried out, this is a Chicago pneumatic type DA sander, and it's called a palm sander. Now I've had this one for about 5 years and I have used this one forever, and it's pretty good. When I wanted to upgrade this one, because I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to be using one a lot, this has got a lot of wear on it. This has been a pretty good sander though. I went up to the Air Advantage, and this one was rated really high by body shop guys. Now this type sander, I'll get a little bit closer. It's called a palm sander. You basically put it in your palm. When you press down, you can sand. This one ran about $165, just to give you a price line guarantee. This one I can tell is a quality sander. On the bottom you've got a lever to adjust your airflow. This one's better than the Chicago pneumatic. Now if you're going to spend some money on something, the DA sanders are the thing to spend it on. So I would suggest you get either one of the lesser expensive ones that's this style, or if you can't afford anything else, you can get one of the knuckle buster ones, but if you've got a smaller compressor, you're just going to be spitting in the wind because that one's really tough to use. Alright, the next thing you're going to need is a spray gun. This one is very cheap. You can see that it's got a lot of use. I've probably painted 6 or 8 cars. I actually painted an RV with this thing. It's supposed to be a HVLP, which means high volume, low pressure, which I think in your cheaper guns that's not really the case. You're actually running a little bit higher pressure to get the paint out of it. But this one actually has done a great job. There's paint guns that go up to $500 or $600. I'm not a big believer that you can't get a good paint job with an inexpensive gun. As long as you keep it clean. That's one of the biggest things, is keeping your gun clean after you use it is going to be your biggest deal. Take it apart, clean the needle, clean the inside of it. This is, for everything I've done, this one has turned out to be a pretty decent spray gun. Now with the new project, with the YJ project, I decided that I wanted to go ahead and get a new gun. And let me show you that one. Okay, so there's a ton of really good spray guns out there that you could get. The one that I ended up buying for this project was a Disposable starting line. Now this one came with 2 guns, a small gun and a bigger gun like this. This is the bigger spray gun. It's got interchangeable nozzles, one for primer, which is going to be a bigger hole so the primer can come through, or the smaller ones for paint, for clear, for automotive finishes. Now I think I paid like $150 for the 2 spray guns, and it came with a case and a cleaning kit and everything from Eastwood Company, and I was really happy with it. Disposable has been a big name in spray guns for many, many years, and I'm sure this one's made in China or somewhere cheap, not made in the United States. But for the garage mechanic or somebody that's wanting to spend some money, less money on tools, this is the one that I chose. Now I sprayed a little bit of paint through the smaller gun when I was painting the inner fender, and it sprayed actually very, very nice. It's got your volume, your fan control, and your volume control here. It comes with a gauge on the back. It comes with the rest of it. But for $150, that's a really good investment. If you keep your gun clean when you're done using it and you clean it out, it'll last a long time. If you're like me, when I was young, man, I used to leave paint all in them and then think I was going to clean it out later. It just really is a huge, huge pain to clean them out. So clean your gun out on the beginning. But this is one of the, for $150, that's a good one. Or, you know what, if you don't have that much money, go down to Harbor Freight and get one of their guns, because I believe you can get a pretty decent finish with that if you're shooting base clear. Now you may have noticed on that spray gun and on this first one that I had, this guy here, there's no cup on it. I don't have a cup on it. What I use, and these are really super cheap, I go to Harbor Freight Tools and I get what's called a disposable paint gun cup, because number one, I'm a little bit lazy, and number two, I don't have to worry about getting crap in the gun and having to clean it all out. There comes like 6, they're very inexpensive, like $6 for this, and it's a plastic cup, and that's what I use because they're disposable. Now I wipe them down and use them a couple times, but after a while I just chuck these away, and then I'm not worried about trying to clean out all the paint from the cup gun when I go from color to a clear coat. And I really do like these. For the price, man, they're awesome. The last thing that I would talk about as far as equipment that you have to have, get you a respirator. Respirator. When I was young, I can remember I painted this long wrecker, and it was red and gold, and I painted the back of it red and I painted the front gold, and I didn't use a respirator at all. When I first started out as a kid, I didn't go get respirators. I just thought, hey, okay. I mean, I had red boogers for a week. Now, I can only imagine what that did to my sinuses and to my lungs and everything else. So as I got older, when I started painting, I really had a problem. I could tell that it did hurt to breathe if I started getting around a lot of solvents. So this is just a 3M respirator. These are about 20 bucks. You can use it for your whole project. I use it for sanding sometimes. When they get older and I think that the cartridges are worn out a little bit, I'll wear them when I'm sanding. Just use them for a sanding respirator. I like these. I don't get the full face ones, or the, but for garage work like this, something like this in the $20 range will keep your lungs protected and keep you from getting just junk all down in your lungs. The other thing that I would say, you might find a local distributor for sandpaper, other miscellaneous sundry items. I found that my local Napa store is one of the few that carries stuff here, but they will bend me over when I try to buy stuff. So I buy most of my stuff from TCP Global. TCP Global is a company, internet company that sells paint, painting supplies, everything else that you would need that you can't get locally. That's where I buy most of my stuff, and they're very reasonably priced. I buy sandpaper there. You're going to need some sandpaper. You're going to need other things. Now, you're working in a garage that you're not going to use these tools that often. So let me just show you a couple of cheap tools that you're going to need to complete your job. Anytime you lay down primer, anytime you need to do the sanding, when I was a kid, when I was younger, I would just take my hand and wet sandpaper, and I would just hand sand it. What you really need to use is one of these. This is a 3M number 20 wet or dry sponge pad. It's a small sponge pad that you wrap your paper around, and what it does is, instead of putting the pressure from your fingertips, it spreads the pressure out. So you're going to get a lot better sanding by using a small foam pad like this than you would doing it with your hand. You're going to actually smooth out the finish rather than causing more waves. Now, I've done it the other way, and the results haven't been that good sometimes. So yeah, get one of these and you'll be okay. The other thing is get a good block sander. You can go to TCP Global. I don't think you need to buy the $200 set that has every block sander in the world, but you need one that's probably 8 inches long that you can actually use for the harder paper to take down your Bondo in a smooth line. Or if you're doing wet sanding, it's nice to have a little bit bigger one that you can kind of go back and forth, but they make them out of foam, and I think they're about 30 bucks. One of the things that you might realize from listening to all this stuff that I'm talking about is painting cars and coming out with a good job is not an inexpensive process if you want it to look like something. You want to take a roller and paint tractor enamel from TSC on it, yeah, you can do that. But to get a quality job, you're going to need some tools. You don't necessarily need to have a $400 spray gun. You don't have to have a $400 DA sander. But all those things make it nice. I think bottom baseline, you're going to need a spray gun, you're going to need a compressor, and you're going to need a lot of elbow grease if you don't have air tools on it. I welcome any kind of questions or comments on the video. Let me know. I'll be happy to answer any of the questions that I have. This is I approach it from a different aspect of production work, which is a body shop. I look at it like I'm doing this in my driveway. I have to be able to shoot base clear because it dries so quickly. I can buff it out if there's bugs, trash, dirt, anything that gets into it. I can usually clean that up fairly well without having to do a lot of extra work. So give me some comments and questions on it, and hopefully in Nashville it'll warm out a little bit, and the next week or two we can start doing some body work.